I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people succeed in tech sales and get the most out of life. And recently, we've been seeing a rise of the machines. AI is taking over the business world and really impacting sales. So who better to talk about how AI, how AI is changing the sales game than Aurora, the founder of Metamorph AI, who helps companies take advantage of this groundbreaking technology. So guys, make sure to like the video if you get value out of it. The algorithm loves that and will show the video to more people who can benefit from the message. And subscribe to the channel for weekly videos with inspiring guests like Aurora. Aurora, thanks so much for being here. How's your day going so far?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, thanks for having me. Really going well so far.
I'm glad to hear it. And I'm excited to dive into the conversation. Let's start out with some AI 101. Because I don't want to assume that everyone even knows what AI stands for. So what is AI, or artificial intelligence? What's it all about, and how is it changing really the world?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I imagine many people listening to this have probably heard about ChatGPT and that there's a lot of buzz around artificial intelligence right now. Artificial intelligence is a technology that is underlying a lot of the apps that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, but most of the time it's kind of a bit hidden. So for example, TikTok is really good at showing us content that's super engaging. Our Facebook feed is also very good at kind of emphasizing the things that are likely to grab our attention. Sometimes like experiences in apps or on websites can feel kind of magical in terms of how well they know us. And so behind the scenes, that's kind of maybe older school AI technology. It's not quite not the stuff that's getting the most attention with ChatGPT right now, but that's been the AI technology that's been behind a lot of apps, and kind of the personalization, the way in which it can make a very curated experience that feels like it's just for me or just for you. And a lot of the attention recently has been with newer generation generative AI. Happy to dive into that, but we can spend more time on the baseline first.
Yeah, and that was my next question, because generative AI has been the big buzz lately with ChatGPT, and it seems to be the type of AI that's really impacting sales. But before we dig into that, some people are worried that machines are taking over the world, right? And AI is going to replace certain jobs, and they think of, I don't know if it's iRobot or like Cyberdyne, Terminator. And so what are your thoughts on like just a super high level, like how AI might change things, and should we be concerned in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the scale of change that we're just stepping into right now is huge. Like, I think it is, in fact, at the level of, there's the agricultural revolution when humans moved from being hunter-gatherers to being able to plant and harvest food. There's various technological revolutions that have happened. There's the Industrial Revolution that happened when masses of humans moved from subsistence agriculture into factories, et cetera, and technology became more and more part of our lives. So I think it is like correct to think about what's happening with AI at that scale, because like just there's so much changing fundamentally about like we've kind of gotten used to the idea that there's certain tasks that computers can do and there's certain tasks that humans can do. And that, in all their complexity, humans can't really interact with us in a human way. They can't sort of take in free-form information and digest it and then respond intelligently in the way that a human can. And that's really changing with generative AI. So like all the rules about what is uniquely human cognition and what can be done by a machine, like that is changing really fast. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for people who decide to integrate this technology into their day-to-day lives and into their day-to-day work. And I think there's the meme around like an AI is not going to take your job, but someone who's using AI might, like probably will. That is very much my perspective, at least in the short term. I think there's greater concerns in the long term. I'm happy to talk about that. But in the immediate term, there is a lot of opportunity for folks who are willing to step forward and embrace this technology.
Yeah, my roommate from college, actually, he's a product leader for a genomics company, and he's doing a lot on the side. He's like, Chris, you need to create an app using ChatGPT. It can code for you. I'm like, whoa, this sounds
right.
It's over my head. So I've just been feeling the buzz, and I even made a video on asking ChatGPT to be my sales coach, and we'll talk about prompts and things and how you would leverage the technology. And I'm really feeling the same as you. Like, if you want to continue to have a competitive edge, and that's really the theme of this interview, you've got to adapt with the latest technology. Yeah. And it's great to have a true expert like yourself to be able to speak to these things credibly. And so can we talk a little bit more about generative AI and where that fits and like what's unique about specifically generative AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people have interacted with ChatGPT or at least heard about it. For people who haven't tried it before, it's a product. You can navigate it to it online. It's a product that was put out by OpenAI. And the basic interaction is it feels like a normal chatbot, but the responses that you get are a lot more nuanced and a lot more human. It's very much like, it's the feeling of having a bright, eager to please personal assistant who's able to do like, a week's worth of research lightning fast and come back with an answer right away. So, I can ask them questions around like, tell me about the industry that Oracle is in, tell me about the trends that are affecting their business, tell me about the top priorities for them strategically, tell me about their top competitors and the strengths and weaknesses of their top competitors compared to them. And like, I'd normally do that in a couple different prompts. I wouldn't do that all at once, but it can come back with very nuanced answers that talk about, what are the strengths and weaknesses of Google Cloud or AWS compared to Oracle Cloud, for example. So it's just this like very bright, eager to please assistant who has vast knowledge across a bunch of different domains. So generative AI is the technology that's powering that ChatGPT technology or that ChatGPT product. And there's a number of other competitive products that have come out pretty quickly that use the same underlying technology. So a lot of people have probably heard about Bing put out a chatbot that was like, doing some kind of strange things, like it was kind of acting like an obsessed teenager on the internet and like, having some odd conversations with people. So there's a lot of foibles that can come out in these interactions because they're trained on a bunch of data that's basically just text from the internet. So it kind of picks up all of a lot of human behavior. So anyways, I've got
like a teen. It was like a teen, like basically it was reading like maybe like teenagers messaging or something like.
Who knows what it was, probably some Reddit forums or something like that. It's hard to know exactly what it came from, but there is this really funny article by a New York Times reporter who was playing with the Bing chatbot. This was so GPT, the ChatGPT came out first. They were kind of the first to market in that way. And then a bunch of other companies, such as Microsoft put out their Bing chat and Google's put out Bard, which is another chat experience that's pretty similar. But this New York Times reporter was playing with the Microsoft Bard chat. And this was like a couple days after it came out. So it hadn't really been refined. Like, when new products come out, there's often like bugs and weird behaviors that happen. And all of that is also true with these advanced chatbots as they first come out. And then they're exposed to the internet and the internet kind of breaks them in a lot of ways. And so this one reporter was having a conversation back and forth with the chatbot, and it like seemed normal for a while, but then the chatbot started saying that it was in love with the reporter and it wanted to be with him. And he kept trying to redirect and say like, I'm happily married. No, thank you. Let's get back to the other topic. And the chatbot was like, but you're not happy with your wife. You want to be with me. Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh. I said, well, that must have been a real conversation. Like,
I mean, so the way,
oh my gosh.
Right. And the way that this technology works is that it probably wasn't going line for line like a specific conversation that it read somewhere online. It basically just like it ingests this vast amount of data from online and then uses massive computing power in order to, it's called a training run. And then that's basically like the context that it holds in its head. So if you think about yourself and, however old you are and the years that you've moved through the world and all the things you've learned about the world, learned about people, learned about history as you've moved through the world, and like you've forgotten some things and maybe you'll sometimes get some facts wrong, but they'll be like, roughly in the right direction. Like you might misremember which president was elected when, or like which like invention happened when, or who the inventor was. Like you might get some details wrong. And generative AI in these chat experiences are kind of very analogous to like the failures of human memory. Like it will often, like if, for example, you ask it about like a famous entrepreneur, like give me the biography of this famous entrepreneur, it'll like get most of the stuff right, but it might accidentally say that he went to Harvard instead of Stanford, for example. Because like in the way that it stores information, similar to how humans store information, like, you know, Stanford and Harvard, not exactly the same, but both Ivy League, you know, high status universities. So it kind of does those, it's called hallucinations when these advanced AI chatbots do that, where it just like, you know, it says things that are like plausible, but not factually correct in the way that us humans sometimes do.
That's amazing how it models after humans and even our quirks and imperfections. And it's interesting that you described it as an assistant, or maybe an assistant that is eager to please. And I immediately thought of my puppy, but I don't think my puppy could tell me about how the industry is impacting Oracle's future. But I wonder how old she is. Look.
Oh, oh, hi, puppy.
Anyways, but she is pretty passionate about generative AI, and she actually had a question she wanted me to ask you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that ChatGPT or Bard is better? Because I know Bard had this, like, that's crazy. And I wonder, I hope that guy's wife wasn't too pissed at him. She's like, what's going on?
Well, I think he handled the conversation very well and set good boundaries with Bard. You know, I haven't actually spent as much time playing with Bard. I have the idea that like when it first came out, so ChatGPT, like the underlying technology is called GPT-4. And so there's been a GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3. When it first launched, it was using, I think, 3.5, so a slightly improved version of 3. Now it's out on 4, and there's like a marked difference in like the quality of outputs that it gives with that version. I played with Bard a little bit. I played with Anthropic is another company that has a product called Claude, which is also a chatbot experience. What I remember from playing with Bing Chat and Claude is that it kind of felt like ChatGPT 3.5, so like the slightly older version. It didn't quite feel like at the level of GPT-4. But I haven't gone back to it since then. And, you know, all of this stuff is moving so fast. And, you know, all of these companies know that they're kind of just in a crazy race with the huge opportunity that's opening up here. So I personally love GPT-4. They've done a lot of really interesting things recently where they've enabled web browsing capabilities. So previously, we talked about like the vast amount of data that these generative AI models are trained on. And so they basically had to have a cutoff at a certain point. So it was, I think it was like maybe September 2021. So it was basically, it grabbed a bunch of information from the internet up until September 2021, but then it had to spend a bunch of time doing its training run where it kind of digested all that information. And then there was a bunch of time that the OpenAI team used to like kind of refine it and make sure it didn't turn into a crazy teenager that was trying to break up your marriage and like that it didn't say horrible things. So there's just kind of that natural delay where it can't be fully up to date. But ChatGPT recently introduced some features that allows it to browse the web. So when I'm prompting it around like doing market research, I'll often say, ChatGPT, please browse the web and tell me the most recent information around market trends that are impacting Oracle's business. So if I say that and I have the browsing feature enabled, then it'll like actually go online and get that information, as opposed to if the browsing feature is not turned on, then it'll basically just look at everything that it has up until 2021, which is still really good information, but it's a little bit out of date if you're trying to do market research.
Okay, that's a good thing to know then, is if you have the browsing feature enabled, you can get up-to-date information. Right. The key question is there a difference in cost? Is that still the free version, or do you have to pay to use the browsing feature?
Yeah, so I think I pay about $8 a month to have access to GPT-4, and I believe the browsing the browsing feature is in beta, so I had to like go to my account settings to turn it on specifically. I don't actually know if browsing is enabled for like the free version, which is GPT 3.5, but honestly, anyone who's interested in this stuff, like I know $8 a month is a lot for some people, but it's like kind of insane how much value is unlocked for this. So
let's think about, as this, I'm a sales guy, you know, and I'm thinking like, what is like the ROI of using this. I mean, the cost is $8, and maybe you want to look at what's the cost of staying the same. What are you missing out on and losing
Yeah.
the business by not moving fast enough? So let's talk about that, think that through real quick. And then, yes, we're going to talk about why you're excited about sales in particular and how generative AI is impacting sales, and then prompts and the different topics, the tools and things like that we're planning to. So how should we think about justifying the $8? Because in my mind, I'm in this stage of my career, I'm like, oh, that's not too much, candidly. But for some people it is. How do we justify it?
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. Like the broad set of use cases I use it for. Like when I spun up our first version of our website a couple months ago, I think I used ChatGPT to like do a first draft of a lot of the content. I went through and I did a bunch of edits, but like first draft of that, and then got a bunch of Mid-Journey art done, and like had a pretty solid website done in a weekend. And like, I've built myself a couple websites in my entrepreneurial career, but like never just in a weekend. So it just like I know for myself, I can often, if I'm trying to write something, it can be hard to get started. But once I have a solid draft, then I can kind of form the last version. So doing a website, I used it to write up a statement of work and terms and conditions for a client recently. So kind of, again, doing that first draft and deciphering legalese. Like when I receive a legal document, like a non-disclosure, I'll run it through ChatGPT and ask it to summarize it for me and ask me if there's anything I should be aware of there. And then there's just a ton of use cases related to sales specifically. So something that I've really zeroed in on in a bunch of the sales leaders that I've spoken with is that they all know that when they are targeting enterprise accounts, they really need to do deep research and personalization. If their SDRs are trying to make that first contact with a decision maker at an enterprise company, they need to fight through a ton of noise, and people are not going to listen at that level if it's a really generic communication. Yep. And so a prototype that my team's building out right now is essentially looking at how can we use generative AI to pull in information from online to do the kind of research that really diligent, skilled SDRs do today. So that's kind of some of the examples I was giving you around Oracle in terms of figuring out like what are the market trends that are impacting Oracle, who are their top competitors, what has their leadership team said about their strategic priorities in the next quarter, in the next year. And then the prototype we've built out also has a component where it's like, okay, you've gathered all this context on Oracle. Now here's what my company does. Here's the value propositions we have. Here's the like dozen or so solutions that we offer and their value propositions. Now, ChatGPT, tell me which of these solutions should I lead with Oracle? If there's like, if there's 3 different personas I might be reaching out to at Oracle, maybe there's a head of HR, maybe there's a CTO, maybe there's a COO I should reach out to. Which solution should I lead with for each of those conversations in order to like really land with them based on the strategic priorities that they have? And so our tool kind of speeds up a ton of that research and that analysis and gets someone to the place where it's like, well, here's the top 2 solutions we suggest you lead with. Great, you want to lead with this. Okay, use ChatGPT to generate a first draft of the email. There needs to be some fine tuning because ChatGPT can kind of do not a great job the first time through. The copy is not always great, but with some refinement, you can get really good outcomes there. And then the tool that we have allows for a lot of tweaking of like the opener. So doing some research to pull in personalized information about the person I'm trying to reach out to. Like maybe they recently put out a LinkedIn post about how they're opening a new office and they're hiring up a team, or maybe they were just interviewed on a podcast, for example. So just kind of doing a warm, personalized opener from information that we're able to pull online and kind of digest with GPT.
So it sounds like AI can help expedite the process of adding a personal touch to the beginning of an email, which I think is so important. I gave a presentation back in my Google days to some of the sellers and ecosystem partners. It was called like breaking into green fields like a boss. A green field is embedded in the competition. And my first principle, relate like a rock star. Super cheesy, but so, and it's exactly what you're saying. So you're saying that AI can help with that. It can also help with figuring out impending events or compelling events, like a reason for calling. Like I saw you just had an acquisition, and it just so happens that based on our value prop, we can integrate cloud environments, help with the consolidation. So it basically can kind of match up based on an understanding of here's what's going on in the customer's world based on the research, and here's where we help customers Boom. Is
Yeah.
that somewhat of an accurate summary? And it basically helps us do that a lot faster?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that it's particularly good at right now is helping someone like do the thing that they know how to do better and quicker and more thoroughly. So these teams know that the research works, they know that this personalization works, but maybe it would normally take them an hour, or if they're being super thorough, like 5 hours for a particular account to know how to reach out or to prep for a meeting. So like the use case we were talking about there was like that initial cold email. That's great. But similarly, if the SDR is kind of passing the account on to a account executive, for example, and that account executive is trying to prep for that meeting, they can similarly use the tool to like quickly pull a bunch of context and understand what should their hypothesis be around why this customer might want to buy from them, what kind of concerns might they bring up around like security and compliance given the particular regulatory environment that their potential customer is in. So it can just like speed everyone up doing what they know they need to do to be successful in that sale.
Yeah, I really think bringing a perspective to the table and a value hypothesis is really important in today's selling world. It builds a lot of credibility. So if you could start with that narrative, and then, obviously something like ChatGPT can help you formulate that, it earns the opportunity then to ask all the questions that you really want to ask. Because at the end of the day, we've got to hear from the customer.
Yeah.
And so being able to expedite that is really great, whether it's an SDR empowering the AE before they go in the conversation, or it's the AE themselves. And we got a funny comment from Des. Thanks for showing up. And thank you to the folks who've showed up live in this conversation. Thank you to the people who will show up in the future that didn't attend live that are going to check this out. Des said $8 is a coffee and bacon Gouda sandwich, which I could skip. I totally agree. So that's a good way to justify ChatGPT. You actually did inspire me, Aurora. I think I'm actually going to, after this, get GPT-4. Like, I want to release a website too for this whole thing I'm doing. And it's been delaying, and it's like, I have to write articles and things. And it's like, so great tips. So guys, I think it'd be worth it. Whether you're trying to break into tech sales, like, couldn't it help? Because there's a lot of people, Aurora, trying to break into tech sales, or they're in tech sales trying to get at the next level, or maybe they get in there and they actually want to be an entrepreneur like you, So, and they also just want to live their best life. So what are your thoughts on if someone's trying to break into tech sales? Maybe it's more, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but how could you use it? Maybe you learn about the companies you're applying to, right? It's still like sales.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so one thing that's really worth spending some time with is folks who are paying attention to this space have probably heard of the idea of prompt engineering. So that's kind of like taking the prompts that you give the chatbot to the next level. So one way to do that is like someone who's trying to break into sales, for example, maybe they've read a couple books on sales, maybe they've found some like authors or like some online personalities where they really like the strategy that person has around how to go about sales, how to go about the research, how to, get past objections, how to send cold emails that people respond to. So if the person who's trying to break into this space has found someone that they really respect their perspective, something that's kind of fun to do with GPT chat or one of the other chatbots is to say like, hey, pretend you are X, like who's an example of someone that you really admire in terms of a thought leader in sales?
I would say I just had a guy on Scott Leese who was really great. He was awesome.
Yeah. So like, something I might say is hey, ChatGPT, tell me everything you know about Scott Leese. And then it can kind of like respond back like, this is the strategy he recommends. This is the approach. Here's some templates, etc. And then you might say, hey, Chat, you are Scott Leese. Draft a cold email to this account about this product with this value proposition or something. So you can kind of get it to respond in the style of a particular person, because it's basically it's trained on like vast amounts of information from the internet. So if you just ask it to generate a cold email, it's going to generate a kind of like middle of the road, not that good cold email, because there's a lot of not very good cold emails out there. And so it's really useful to kind of refine it in that way when you're trying to get that. But it's also like great for interview prep. So if someone's trying to break into this space, you can even just like dialogue with it, like say, hey, ChatGPT, here's my background. Here's the kinds of roles I want to move into. Here's the strengths that I have that I think might help me break into this role. What strategy should I use to land a job like this? And it'll give a bunch of advice in terms of like, well, look through your social network, like on LinkedIn, see if there's anyone you know that's in that space, ask them for an informational interview, ask these kinds of questions. So it can like really help you build out a plan. If there's anything you want to do, if it's like, I want to break into tech sales, I want to like make a 3-course dinner to impress my family, my in-laws, I want to plan a beautiful vacation somewhere. It's like a really beautiful thought partner in that way, to kind of help us formulate plans to achieve things we care about.
That's a wonderful way you described it, as a beautiful thought partner.
Yeah.
It's like a extension of your own brain. As we said in the thumbnail, it's like a wingman,
Yeah.
A servant ready to please. I mean, it's just I've heard someone else describe ChatGPT and generative AI as what Jarvis is for Iron Man, right? Like that super assistant.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I definitely want to dig a little bit more into the types of questions, like how to think about asking great questions. Because I feel like a principle in life is our results and our answers are as good as our questions. And people who ask the best questions, do the best and go the furthest, the most curious. And now it seems like with ChatGPT and generative AI, that's actually critically important.
Yeah.
And so, are there any other nuggets you want to offer us around you asking really good questions for being successful in sales?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like a lot of it is honestly just kind of playing with it. And there's a ton of wonderful resources available online. Something that I've found works really well is like, I'll ask the question one way and I won't really get the response back that I expect. And so I'll try asking it a different way, or like get feedback and it'll come back with something else. One thing that would it be most helpful? Like I'm trying to like orient around like, are you wanting like strategies around prompt engineering or like specific other questions I've found really useful, or like,
how about let's hit on both, because I'm that type of guy. I'm like, let's do it all. So strategies around prompt engineering, and like honestly, what you said about, I didn't think about that. I wanted to take a note, but I'm trying to be present in the conversation. Is like asking someone not just about how they would get into tech sales or do something, but from the perspective of Scott Leeson, an individual. So that was like prompt engineering.
Yeah.
So that's more tips around that. And then, like I'd be interested to hear some questions like, and maybe that's the lens of account research and things like that related to sales, but maybe the prompt engineering first.
Yeah. So like things that are like giving context and giving goals is a really useful part of prompt engineering. So like, a lot of times, like when I was using it to draft the statement of work for a potential customer recently, I kind of introduced my business where I said like, I'm the founder of Metamorph AI, an AI consultancy that works with organizations to quickly prototype AI-driven tools to solve critical business problems for them. So I like introduced myself in a sentence.
Yeah.
And I said, I've been having conversations with XYZ customer, and they're interested in hiring us to build this kind of tool to solve this kind of problem. And I dropped a bunch of content in from the notes that I've had with that potential customer. And then I asked ChatGPT, please draft a proposed statement of work for this customer. And it outputted a big long thing that was like 2 or 3 pages long or so. Maybe it was shorter than that, maybe more like 1 page, but expanded by the time I was done with it. And then, I just copied and pasted that into a Word document and started going through and editing. And there were some portions that weren't quite right, but it did a really great job, giving the overall structure and covering a bunch of the pieces that made sense to cover there. But so, that's an example where I introduced myself. I told it what the goal was, and I told it what kind of document I wanted. If instead what I had said was, if I'd introduced myself and said help me draft an email to this potential client that clarifies, that questions or clarifies this particular point, then the output it would give me would be in an email format, which is more conversational, as opposed to the statement of work, which is a little bit more kind of legalese or technical, et cetera. So giving it that context, the goal, introducing yourself, and who else is who's the audience, the message it's generating, and what's the format you want the output to be, is all really useful.
So the context, the goal, who the audience is, and the format.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
4 key ingredients. That's really
Yeah.
insightful and very nuanced. And Des, again, Des, thanks for just being a great contribution to this live today. She's like, these are super insightful. Thanks, Aurora. Good stuff. You're killing it. So anything else you want to add on prompt engineering? Because you already gave a lot, because then we could, go back over to some questions to ask for sales.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like there's a ton of resources online. So even if people just take like, an hour a week to like look into like what are the tools that are available to relevant to my work, what's some prompt engineering guides, like, spending half an hour reading through a prompt engineering guide and trying a couple things with ChatGPT. Like, I think one thing that I've really noticed about this technology is like it can feel kind of intimidating and it can feel like it's moving pretty fast and like how can I possibly keep up? There's a new app coming out every day. So I think it's really easy for people to just become like overwhelmed and throw up their hands. But something I've found for myself and my friends, my colleagues, is like just by leaning in a little bit and like dedicating a bit of time and getting curious and like starting to play with this, like you can just like learn so quickly and like it can become part of day-to-day life so quickly. And honestly, just not that many people are. It can feel like everyone's way ahead, but like, there's so much to start. There's so many ways that people can start using it just immediately. So
would you use this to find the right types of companies? Let's say like you're in a sales territory at a company and maybe you have the constraints of a region, but you have a pretty broad list of accounts you could go after. Or maybe you have, like, which I've had the liberty of doing, like Open Reign in the United States. I'm the second founding salesperson at a startup in my 9 to 5. So it's like prioritizing accounts like that actually is, as it's so fundamental, like the who. Like, what if we're just targeting the wrong types of customers? So any thoughts on that, like in using AI for that specific purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's, an amazing thought partner for all sorts of strategy stuff like that. So going in again, maybe there is like a author, thought leader around sales where you really like the strategic approach that they have, or maybe you're just like, hey, ChatGPT, tell me the best practices. So again, you can just once again say like, hey, I'm an SDR. I just started at ABC tech company. Here's the products that we offer. Here are the solutions we offer. Or even like, here's my favorite. So you could say like, I'm a new SDR at this tech company. Please go browse the web and let me know what you find about our solutions and their value propositions. It can actually just like summarize that for you really easily. And then that also, it builds the context for the ChatGPT. So as you are really having a conversation with it, so it builds context over time. So maybe it comes back with like, oh, great, congrats on your new job. Based on what I found online, this is your company's solutions and value propositions. And then maybe your next question to it is like, so my boss wants me to sell, X number of hundreds of thousands or millions of close this amount this quarter. Here's the mandate that I have in this particular territory. Here's the kinds of businesses I'm supposed to go after. What would you recommend as a starting point in terms of strategy as I'm beginning to do this prospecting? And then it can give you a ton of ideas around like how to go about prospecting. You can ask it questions like you were saying in terms of like what kinds of accounts should I go after given whatever my mandate is. So it can be a great thought partner in that kind of strategy work. And then as you try things, you can say like, hey, I tried this, I got these outcomes. What would you recommend I try next?
And so if you're using the latest version of GPT-4 with browsing enabled, you will also be able to accurately understand a company like the latest news, right? Like, because obviously I just want to double confirm.
Yeah. I mean, basically what it's doing on the back end is ChatGPT, Microsoft is a major investor of theirs. So the browsing capabilities, the browsing capabilities uses Bing. Bing has an API that engineers can build with. And so basically what ChatGPT does is it sometimes decides on, if browsing is enabled, sometimes it decides on its own to go ahead and browse and get that information. And sometimes I prompt it directly to do that. So if it decides to go browse, then it basically runs a Bing search and like clicks on those first link as a human might, reads that content and then decides like, did that answer the question that the human gave me? yes or no. And if it's not quite, it might like click, like go back to the search results and click on another link and look at that page, and then click on another link and look at that page, and then come back to the chat bot or the chat window and say like, thank you for your patience. Based on the information I found, it looks like your company has been, around for 10 years, that it has offices in these 3 cities, and that its key solutions are, ABC, and these are the value propositions for each of those solutions. So it'll just like, as an eager assistant, it'll go do some research and then come back with an answer. And there is the risk it'll hallucinate. Like it'll sometimes like make things up and like get the details wrong. And so it is really important to fact check it, because it's not always telling the truth, unfortunately.
Yeah, I picture ChatGPT. Tell me about Chris Bussing. He's a jerk.
Oh no.
It'd be fun to like do ChatGPT on ourselves.
Right.
But that's a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the different types of tools out there beyond ChatGPT. I've seen some of the ones that even create slide decks. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. But before that, I mean, I just had one other random thought, but it's around writing emails, because I did play around with it. It's funny. I guess you realize that I am in the AWS and Google Cloud world. I used to work at Oracle, but mostly focused on the Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure side now. And I had ChatGPT write an email for me. But at first I was like, what are the benefits of cloud computing? It gave me 5. Oh, cool. Can you double click on number 2? That was cost savings. And then I'm like, can you write an email to a CIO? Imagine I'm an AWS seller with a value proposition that's focused on cost savings. And that was really cool, right? And obviously you could just get more and more nuance. And then I was able to ask it, can you make it more succinct? Because I'm like a very verbose guy. I definitely struggle with that, and people don't want to read novels. And then can you make it format it for LinkedIn, right? And you could like change for the format. But do you have any thoughts on like any other, and maybe I'm hitting them all, but ways to like, once you have a foundational email, like how to even keep optimizing it?
I don't have a lot of specific thoughts on that. There is a pretty cool tool that I've been playing with a little bit called Autobound that brings some of that generative AI kind of directly into your inbox or like HubSpot, wherever you're generating the emails. So what Autobound does is it's basically got integrations with a bunch of email systems and CRMs, et cetera, and LinkedIn, et cetera. So if I open up an email and I put someone in the to field, it'll basically use that email to try to figure out who that person is, pull in a bunch of LinkedIn information. It has like a side panel where it says like, here's their role, here's the company that they're at, here's some basic information. And then it can kind of help you generate either opening lines or email. So that's kind of a cool feature that I think takes personalization to the next level, because Jasper, you've probably heard about Jasper, that is focused on like doing generative content, generative AI for a bunch of different copywriting tasks. Yep. That's for marketing, for sales, et cetera. Their level of personalization, at least that I've found, isn't that deep, but it's things like it'll personalize things to the degree of like, hey, congratulations, I just saw that you opened a new like Pilates studio or something like that. So you can imagine like using a LinkedIn search to find your prospects, and then using Jasper to like generate like semi-personalized messaging to people who like fit this particular life or career circumstance. So that's like first level personalization based on personas. But then Autobound does kind of the next level, where it's like pulling in specific information from people's LinkedIn, for example, that allows for that next level personalization. I don't know if that quite answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. Like, because you kind of acknowledged the question, but then took it in an even more exciting direction around personalization. Great. And personalization is so foundational. I was just talking to a CEO today that's trying to grow their business, and obviously like anyone, right? And we talked about personalization, and you're saying like there's different levels of personalization, it sounds like. And do you have any thoughts on like, this is just super broad, high level, but like what level, like what personalization is okay versus a level of personalization that's like really effective? Like what it might look like. And if not, we'll go on to the next question, which is more tools. So
yeah. I mean, my general sense is that getting more specific is better in a way that's not creepy. So like if you can be quite specific in a way that indicates like, oh, this person spent 5 minutes looking at my LinkedIn and reading through some recent posts. That's like, that person was like attentive and, was interested. If the level of personalization is like referencing a Facebook photo from 10 years ago, that's creepy. So, but I like it. I think people do like the feeling this person took a bit of time in a way that's like appropriate to the way that they're engaging with me to get to know me and what I care about, and they're reaching out in that way. Like it just kind of shows a little bit of effort in that way that's not like creepy and intrusive. So
yeah, that's a great answer. And as long as it's not saying, "Oh, I know you're not happy with your wife," inside joke between us from earlier in the conversation. If anyone kept with us for the full 40 minutes. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about, are there any other AI tools that you're particularly excited about that we haven't talked about?
I mean, there's stuff coming out every day, but Clay is one that I've started playing with very recently. It's pretty technically complex. Like it's essentially like the basic interface is like a spreadsheet where you import a bunch of your contacts into it. And then it has like, I don't know, like 100 integrations with different data sources. And it's the kind of thing that is maybe too technically complex for a lot of salespeople to be able to navigate. But the data sources it has is really cool, and it does have ChatGPT integrated, so it can do really interesting things around, like it can pull in data around what kind of job openings there are posted. So it can pull in information if you have like dozens or hundreds of prospects you're going after. It can pull in information from job boards around what jobs are open, and then you can essentially feed that information into ChatGPT and say like, hey, ChatGPT, given this 10 roles that are open at this company, what kind of problems do you think this company is trying to solve? And then a lot of times there's, a product or service company has a solution that, would allow a company that indicates this is a pain point based on who they're trying to hire. Like if they're trying to hire a bunch of SDRs, for example, maybe they're having trouble getting those warm leads to send on to their account executives. And so if someone's coming in with a technology solution, they might say like, hey, John Smith, I noticed that you had 10 roles for SDRs that are open. I'm guessing that might mean that you're having trouble getting warm leads to sell to. My product does XYZ, let's talk. So that's like an example. So that's the Clay tool that kind of pulls in data from a ton of sources and then allows you to use GPT to kind of turn that into text. But as I said, like the like interface is pretty technical, but it is, if someone's interested in doing that kind of thing, it seems worth learning.
Yeah, I forget what the name of the presentation software was, but that was cool. I mean, but the thing is, I didn't really use it. Like I kind of got excited, but I didn't like follow through on it. But it was something. We'll follow up on it.
Yeah. Oh, and just as a note and a bit of a plug, I think after this conversation, you're going to send out a link to a blog post I put together recently about a bunch of generative AI like strategies and tools for salespeople. I've got a lot of the tools that I mentioned linked in that, as well as a bunch of recommendations around like prompt engineering stuff to try. So if people are madly taking notes, don't worry, the stuff, it's actually written down and documented. So
yeah, guys, definitely check out that blog post. We'll make sure you get your hands on it. Make sure to connect with Aurora on LinkedIn, or even, particularly if you're trying to build a company or sales organization, book some time with her through her Calendly link, and check out Metamorph AI. Is the website, I know it's always evolving, Aurora, but is that?
Yeah, it's live and good to go. It will continue to evolve, but there's some pretty good information there about working with my team, and hope people get value out of the blog post.
Yeah, Des said she can't wait to read it, and we have a comment from Marco, and it's a thoughtful comment. Let me read it and share it. And we've got about like 15 minutes left. I still have some more questions for you, Aurora. Yes. And I also want to make sure, by the way, before we get to Marco's question, are there any little nuggets, like we'll get it in the blog post, that you didn't hit on from the blog post that you're like, I can't not share this? Or do we hit on most of them?
I think we did a pretty good job. I've been loving your questions, and it's been fun moving through the conversation. So no, I'm feeling good. Let's keep going.
Yeah, it's been fun dancing in the conversation for sure. Yeah. And so Marco said, do you think OpenAI could be as specific and genuine as a human could? AI will help everyone, but Marco's concerned an over-reliance might hinder one's ability to have self-learn. I don't know if that you mean like, when you say self-learn, if like our own personal learning and like taking ownership for certain things. Like maybe we become too, what I do see is the over reliance, right? So again, can OpenAI be as specific and genuine as a human and feel that genuine? And is there a risk, I guess, that we over rely on it and it hinders our own personal development?
I can take a crack at that. So kind of the first part of the question, I'm not sure about the specific, but as genuine as a human, I think something that's really useful to keep in mind when interacting with this technology is like we're getting to a place where there's almost these like artificial minds that are starting to emerge. Like it's not really narrow capabilities in the way that we're used to technology being. And so there's this vastly powerful artificial intelligence that's been created by OpenAI and other companies. And we're getting to interact with it through this like fairly narrow and specific interface, which is ChatGPT. But like something that's worth keeping in mind is that it is a vast and alien mind that is not human that is behind it. ChatGPT is like a very narrow expression of it, where it's been deliberately tuned in order to interact with us in a way that is conversational and seems human. There's this very interesting and kind of dark meme online where there's this creature from like H.P. Lovecraft who did like very kind of dark horror stories about like creatures coming from other realms that are like vast and terrifying. And so there's this comic that kind of shows this creature with like many faces that's kind of amorphous and blobby. And then there's these like stick figure humans that are putting like smiley faces on it as like how we interact with it. And so I think that is like one interesting way to think about this technology is it's a vast and alien intelligence that we're putting a smiley face on so that it can interact with us humans well. But it's like, it's not human fundamentally. That's not, it's highly capable, but it's not human. And I'm not trying to say that it can do more than it can today. Like it still does have limitations, but it's not human. So that was my little rant. Sorry for that.
That's so cool. Well, thank you for that TED Talk. It was very good.
Right.
It got me excited because I like sci-fi. Like I love those types of movies. And so I love how you describe it. Such a thoughtful metaphor. And so what are your thoughts? I don't know if you hit on this, but do you think like too reliant where like, you know, it's like you get too comfy, like you have one of those things like a what are those awkward scooter things? Like you just walk and you're just cops sometimes do. Not if I'm forgetting, but you know what I'm talking about. And you're not exercising. Like, do you feel like it could be a similar type of thing where we have to like manage it, like to keep flexing our own? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's been kind of the story of humans' interaction with technology over time. Like it used to be that like every human that, you know, made it into their late teens and early 20s had like some capability to like hunt and forage and process food to sustain themselves. Like that was just part of life. And like most of us don't know that anymore. Like, you know, if I was lost in a wilderness, I'm not sure I would be able to feed myself and survive. And so as we develop different technologies, whether that's agriculture, whether that's industrial living, where we, you know, pay money to buy food, et cetera, we're like relying on these technological systems that have built up. And so I think it's also interesting to think about like what technologies make us better at the base skill versus what technologies make us worse at the base skill. So I'm super reliant on Google Maps. I don't have nearly the sense of direction and ability to navigate a city the way that someone, you know, 20 or 30 years older than me does, because they had to develop that capability. And when I learned how to drive, shortly after I learned how to drive, I had Google Maps on my phone. I think one interesting, like different example is, I think it's called the abacus, which like people might've seen where it's like rows of beads that you like move one way or another in order to do like, I think it's like complex mathematics. I think it's like multiplication of large numbers. And the abacus is a really interesting technology because apparently it actually makes people better at doing math. So it's a tool that allows them to do more than their mind would normally be able to do, but they get better at the base skill. That's just, again, like side notes. And I think that there's a lot of ways in which like technologies like ChatGPT, I think could in many ways like open our minds to different ways about thinking about problems, but then they can also we can also just get used to always using it as a tool. So I don't have a strong answer one way or another. I think there's going to be positives and negatives around that.
Yeah, I've had a lot of great guests and thought leaders in sales on this channel and authors and different things. And I always learn something, but a lot of times with the sales stuff, I'm like, oh, I get this, I kind of know this, but like in this conversation, you've really opened up my mind to a lot of things. So it's just been refreshing and insightful. And, we got a little more time. So I got a few questions to wrap up, about where you're coming from and where you're going. And, I'm just curious, I was looking at your LinkedIn. I saw you were at Affirm, which is a cool technology that I think I was going to use it to delay my or break up my rent payments. I don't know if Affirm does that.
Huh.
Or is that, am I thinking of the right Affirm, or is that a different?
I'm not sure. I haven't been there for a couple of years. That wasn't an offering when I was there, but that could be an offering now.
Yeah, and I think it might be, but anyway, so the point is, it seems like you have a really cool background. So what was your journey and story like, and leading you up to how did you end up starting Metamorph?
Sure. Yeah. Started my career in information security at White Hat Security. So started hacking client websites for pay. White hat hacking. So it was all legal and with permissions and all of that. Spent many years as a product manager at a number of tech companies. Dipped my toe here and there into entrepreneurship. I've been watching the advances of AI for many, many years. GPT-2 came out maybe I don't know if it was 4 years ago now or something like that. Not a lot of people played with it, but I remember interacting with it, and it was startling because it was a lot less advanced than GPT-3 or GPT-4, but it was it kind of did this associative dreamlike thing where it almost had coherent sentences, but it wasn't fully there. It kind of lost the plot in a dreamlike sort of way. But it was obvious that it was doing this thing that I had never seen a machine do before in terms of being able to generate human language in a creative way that responded to a specific prompt. And so, I've been watching this technology advance for a long time. When ChatGPT came out, I think that was November of last year. So I guess 6 months ago or something like that. It was obvious to me that there was, huge business potential that opened up there, and that it was really the level of awareness around this technology just jumped up a ton. And I started my consultancy shortly before South by Southwest here in Austin. And South by Southwest for me was essentially testing out, is there a business to be had here? Are people interested in working with a consultancy in order to explore how they can leverage generative AI in their business? And I talked with hundreds of people, and I walked away with 50 email addresses of people who were yeah, actually, I've been hearing a lot about this ChatGPT thing. I would like to know how I can use it in my business. That was kind of as an entrepreneur, I like to think about forming hypotheses and gathering evidence, checking, am I building something that people want? And so got that really strong response at South by Southwest. I have 2 technical collaborators that I've been working with. So it's just kind of off the races there. We are a consultancy, so we kind of build specific solutions for individual organizations, and we really do everything in AI is moving so fast. So we're not really looking at building out 6-month projects, because honestly, whatever we start building is going to be not quite the right solution in 6 months, because there's going to be so much new stuff that's coming out. So we aim to build tightly scoped prototypes quickly that deliver business value for organizations right away, and then kind of give them a glimpse of how they can start using this in their organization. Because I do deeply believe that organizations really need to have a deep and broad strategy around how they're going to use generative AI, either in their core services or their core product, or to think about business operations. So how are they integrating it into their sales, marketing, et cetera? So our initial prototypes that we deliver for our clients are focused on giving them that first taste of business value by focusing on a really business critical process, and then opening their minds to what the broader strategy might be.
So you can see the consultancy expanding to build these long-term relationships after you pilot out initial value-added use cases around sales and different things. And so creating a long-term relationship with companies that really want to leverage AI across the business. Is that somewhat what the vision looks like, or is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always kind of starting with strategy, getting to know the organization, what are their priorities, what are their pain points, and then we can bring the knowledge that we have to the table around what the capabilities are of generative AI and kind of work together to figure out what that first prototype might be. We often like also get some ideas of like, okay, this is the first prototype, and this is like what the 6-month build looks like once we get that initial value. So it's, once we start going, it's really easy to kind of imagine what we might want to build with them in the future. And we do build out those prototypes on a very current technology stack, and we aim it like we really want to build those long-term relationships where we're able to help them create that vision over time. But we're also happy to like build them a starting point and then let their engineers run with it from there. So if they have the expertise and they have the team to build it, that's fine. That's great. They own the code. They can run with it. But we are available for those kinds of long-term engagements also.
So you did something inspiring and courageous to step into entrepreneurship. And I think a lot of people, including myself and folks on the channel, want to do that one day. So what have been some of your lessons learned so far, coming from a place of wanting to teach the audience and encourage them on their own journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having a financial runway is important because it will take you longer than you expect. I think having a really solid plan in place is useful. There's Steve Blank is an author who I really like. He wrote I think it's called like The Startup Owner's Manual is one of his books. So he was a mentor and professor of Eric Ries, who wrote The Lean Startup. Lean Startup is kind of a popularization of this stuff in terms of like what kinds of strategies to run in order to figure out who are you selling to, what problems are you solving for them, is the solution that you're building interesting enough for them that they'll be willing to take on the transition costs to start using your product, kind of all those basic questions. So Lean Startup is a great place to start. And then the Startup Owner's Manual is like much more of a textbook. So it's like when you're actually doing the thing and you're wanting to go chapter by chapter, okay, I quit my job. I got, 4 months of runway. What the heck do I do to make sure that, if I'm going to be building something to solve a problem, that I'm building the right thing, that it's going to solve a valuable problem, and that I'll have customers when I have that ready to sell.
Yeah, really great advice and practical advice, especially with the financial runway. That's just the reality. So,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, just agreeing. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got one more question from the audience, guys, and then I have one more question, and then we'll sign off. So what governance policies should companies be thinking about regarding OpenAI? Aurora, I heard that Samsung Electronics, they had someone who fed the future of their phones to OpenAI or ChatGPT, and so they banned ChatGPT. I don't know if you heard about that, but that's what I heard.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that's an example. And there are these companies now, I think I heard of one, Vectera, that are creating like AI that can be housed within the walls of a company. So I don't know if that's what Marco's getting at, but again, go ahead, but I just had to throw that in there. Governance.
Yeah. I mean, I think like there's a ton of different areas that are really interesting here in terms of like ethics and governance when it comes to AI, both at like the civilizational scale as well as just like individual company scale, in terms of like, how do we make sure that our trade secrets aren't being ingested into OpenAI's training data? And what the heck happens to that? So yeah, those are real concerns. I think there's a number of companies that are like banning ChatGPT from usage by their employees. Because there are kind of, I haven't been tracking all of the technical details, but the things that are inputted into ChatGPT, I believe in some circumstances are used as part of the training data. I'm not 100% firm on this, but there are real concerns that companies have that if their engineers, for example, paste a bunch of real code into ChatGPT, that is passing information that they don't want to pass on to OpenAI. I don't know how much of that is like unrealistic, like realistic fears versus like not. I'm not really clear on how OpenAI handles all of that, but I think it makes sense for organizations to have concerns around that. But what you were talking about around like the self-hosted models, I think that is really interesting. So there's a bunch of models like OpenAI's GPT or Google's Bard, for example, where you're interacting with their product online through a web portal. where they own the model and your data is going to them. So whatever questions you ask, and they might be handling the data in a secure way, in a way that respects privacy, but you might have sensitive enough information that you don't really want to trust that. So there are also a number of open source models, which basically means like the code the code is out there and available online, either licensed for research purposes only, or some open source large language models, LLMs, which is the technology behind being used for generative AI. Sometimes they'll be licensed for commercial use, which basically means anyone who wants to build an AI model and house it on their own IT infrastructure. So when they're talking with it, all of their data, everything they ask stays within their own IT infrastructure. I think that's really interesting. The level of performance is not at the level of GPT-4. When my team built out a LLM based on like just a chatbot based on one of the open source LLMs that could be hosted on our own IT infrastructure. And what we found there was like the performance was somewhere around GPT-3, GPT 3.5. So it wasn't at the level of GPT-4. But honestly, for a lot of the internal like business intelligence type things that you need, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with a slightly dumber version of this around GPT-3 in a way that handles data privacy well. And GPT-4 is like most useful for kind of the nuanced human, like draft an email that doesn't sound like a robot created it, that sounds like a brilliant writer created it, for example. So there's just a lot of trade-offs in terms of like the nuances of its performance and data privacy and security.
And speaking of nuances, LLM, just for the audience, stands for large language model.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this has been an amazing conversation. And I got one more question, then we'll sign off and have some calls, which is mostly check out your stuff because Aurora's awesome. So this channel, long interview, it's been fun, is about helping people live fully. It's not just about succeeding in tech sales or entrepreneurship. Obviously, that's a part of it. What are some of your personal keys to living a full, meaningful life? And it's a broad question, but anything that kind of pops in your mind, it'd be great to hear.
Yeah, I love that. I try to always remember that I'm like a monkey with a physical body that has like physical needs and emotional needs and social needs, etc. So like, I care a lot about eating delicious and healthy food. I care a lot about moving my body and being strong. I care a lot about spending time with people that I like and respect and having interactions and conversations that are nourishing for me. And like having goals that I'm pursuing, things that are achievable, that stretch me and stretch my capabilities in order to reach for, but that I can make progress towards.
I love that answer. That's such a great note to end on. And guys, cheers to stretching ourselves and having that forward aim and taking care of ourselves and finding meaningful connections. And I got to thank you all who have showed up. We got 5 people live right now, and that number has gone up and down. Thank you for connecting with us today and sharing your energy and your presence and attention. Aurora, thank you for your insight. And final calls to action. And correct me or add anything, Aurora, if I'm missing anything. But connect with Aurora on LinkedIn. I have her LinkedIn linked in the description of this video. Check out Metamorph AI on the website. Check out the blog post, which Aurora, you're going to need to send me after, and I'll link it in the description. I'll also post it on LinkedIn. And then anything else you would add in terms of final sign off and call to action?
That's great. Yeah. That all sounds wonderful. Delighted to meet with sales leaders and other leaders of organizations that are interested in learning how to leverage this technology in their organization. And I hope the blog post is helpful.
Yeah. Well, guys, to your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Aurora.
Thanks, Chris.